Hello, my friends. I hope you're doing well. Today is day 204, and we're reading Isaiah chapter 31 through Isaiah chapter 34. But before we get into our recap today, I want to thank you for taking a moment to check out this video. Hopefully, you're finding the yearly Bible reading challenge to be incredibly helpful and enjoyable as we read through God's word and leave feedback on the things we're discovering. If you have not yet accepted the invitation, please take a moment to check out the description box below, and there you'll find the link that will take you directly to the YouVersion Bible app, where you can learn how to join a number of readers reading the Bible every single day and leaving feedback on the things they're discovering. And I do believe it will be a blessing to you as much as I know it will be a blessing to us. So today we're reading chapter 31 through chapter 34. And it is such an incredible, encouraging part of the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah is very unique, and we want to make sure we read it as many people have discovered is the best way to read it. So let me put it this way. That was probably one of the wildest ways to put that. But the book of Isaiah is really broken up into sections, and it's really helpful to read it understanding the sections, the themes that correspond to those unique sections, and how this is an overall depiction of, yes, the plight and the circumstance of Israel contextually, but it is also a depiction of how the Father is uniquely working his will out through the coming of the Messiah, who directly impacts the way Israel will finally become what she's supposed to become, despite the various Israelites who are not on board with what God is trying to do with the nation. So when we read through the book of Isaiah, we have to understand that it is a broad prophetic book. It's very broad, and at times it's speaking broadly about nations, broadly about Israel's enemies. And then sometimes it's just as nuanced as speaking to the moment, directly tied to Israel and Judah. And so we want to understand that. But today we have such a great, encouraging section of chapters that speaks to, yes, the mistake of Israel to rely on other nations in a way that they should be relying on God. But then we have this sort of assurance that God has not given up on Israel as a whole, and he is going to respond to her enemies in the proper manner. So when we look at Isaiah chapter 31, and the first couple of verses are incredibly encouraging in that it shows us that Israel has been trusting in the Lord, trusting in Egypt and the horses and the chariots and all those different individuals who are supposedly strong enough to protect them from what God is going to do against them. Now, the reason this is interesting is because, God uses empires, nations to judge Israel, right? So in this passage, the way to counter what the prophets have been saying about the usage of other nations against Israel is to find a nation that would supposedly be stronger than the nations that were coming. We discover that there are no nations stronger than the nations that are coming because God is sending those nations, and there's no way around it. This is part of God's criticism in chapter 31. You don't get it. It's what he's basically saying. I am sending the nations. The only way to get around these nations that are coming is by coming to me. You don't go to Egypt. And so there's a criticism there, and there's a rebuke in that chapter. But then in chapter 32, it's a complete turn in the opposite direction, where he talks about the coming of the king. And he talks about how the plan that God has is going to be established through this king. You look at verse 8. It says, "But generous people plan to do what is generous, and they stand firm in their generosity. Listen, you women who lie around in ease. Listen to me, you who are so smug. In a short time, just a little more than a year, you careless ones will suddenly begin to care. For your fruit crops will fail, and the harvest will never take place. Tremble, you women of ease. Throw off your complacency. Strip off your pretty clothes and put on burlap to show your grief." He talks about beating your breasts in sorrow. He talks about The palace, the city will be deserted. It talks about all these things that will happen so that in verse 16, justice will be enforced. Justice will rule in the wilderness and righteousness in the fertile field. He says in verse 17, this righteousness will bring peace. Verse 18, my people will live in safety. Verse 19, even the forest should be destroyed. The Lord will greatly bless his people. You can see how the Lord is going to watch over his people despite, and when I say his people, I mean the real Israel, right? Despite the failures and the sin of certain Israelites who have for a long time led the nation astray. The whole judgment idea is about purifying and purging Israel from those individuals so that God can rightfully bless the nation and use the nation, maybe even I say. So you see those kinds of things happen in chapter 32. Chapter 33 is that message that tells Assyria that, listen, you are not who you think you are, and the real ruler is coming to make things right. You see in verse 20, instead you will see Zion as a place of holy festivals. So it's kind of again establishing chapter 33, chapter 32, where it says you will see Zion as a place of holy festivals. You will see Jerusalem a city quiet and secure. It will be like a tent whose ropes are taut and whose stakes are firmly fixed. The Lord will be our mighty one. He will be like a wide river of protection that no enemy can cross, that no enemy ship can sail upon. So you can see the expectation that God himself is going to come and rescue Israel. And that's exactly what we get when Jesus arrives. It is the New Testament's way of saying God has arrived. God, Yahweh, has arrived. And that's such a powerful testament. That's such a powerful witness that we cannot negate, rephrase, or alter. Because if we do that, then what we're doing is we are adjusting and manipulating, or should I say exploiting, the passages in the Old Testament that allude to the fact that Yahweh is going to come. So we see that happening. We see in chapter 34 that the Lord comes to judge the nations. Yahweh is coming enraged against the nations in verse 2. He's going to completely destroy them. In verse 8, it's the day of the Lord's revenge. So you see, when we talk about the day of the Lord, there are two things going on here. There's the judgment that comes upon those who are hostile against the will of the Lord. And then there's the deliverance for those who are faithful to the Lord during these times. All of that happens, and Yahweh is at the center of it all. And so when we begin to read through the Bible, it's so important that we pay attention to the references that are made, how these authors and these writers refer to God, how they refer to his presence, what he's doing, and then how that is neatly placed in the New Testament understanding of Jesus is coming and how that looks for them as they believe in the Old Testament passages. So we got a lot to read. You know, Isaiah is such a unique book. It's studied widely by scholars, and we just want to get our healthy dose of understanding, and it's what we're after. So let me know what you're thinking. Leave your comments in the comment box below. I'd love to know your thoughts. I believe it will be a blessing to all of us, as much as I hope our comments will be a blessing to you. So let's keep going. Let's keep reading. Let's keep studying. I know it'll be a blessing. Until next time, thank you for watching. Take care. God bless. And remember, live by the word.